All right. So today we're going to go over chapter 5.5, which is on analogical reasoning. If we've got time at the end, we will go over some some of the content from exam 2. On Wednesday, we will have class. Part of the class, I will give you the mathematical formula for inductive reasoning that maximizes your chances of marrying your soulmates. So don't miss it. Don't leave town early for Fort Lauderdale or whatever place you're thinking about going that you shouldn't be going. Any questions schedule-wise? How are we doing? Midterm points. Doing all right? Not so good. It got cold. I'm not excited about that. I like last week much better. Felt a little more optimistic. Like spring was here. We're getting through this. Well, just another month and a half. All right. Let's talk about analogical reasoning. Here's how analogical reasoning works. What we do with analogical reasoning is we attempt to predict unseen similarities between two things that seem broadly similar. We attempt to predict unseen similarities based on seen similarities. So you might reason something like this. Gettysburg apparently likes casinos. The first casino I was in had an all-you-can-eat buffet. I'm in a second casino now. It seems similar to the first in many ways. Therefore, this casino as well probably has an all-you-can-eat buffet. Or if casinos aren't your thing, maybe movies are. You might see the first Harry Potter movie and say, hey, that first Harry Potter movie featured witches, wizards, and magic. The second one looks pretty similar. Therefore, I predict the second one will feature witches, wizards, and magic. This, of course, is why Hollywood tries to sell you a sequel based on anything you spend your money on for the first movie, because they think you'll analogically think it will be similar. With Harry Potter, it was. With many other things, it's not. So the analogical syllogism is this. Most things that are true of X, the first well-known example, are also true of Y, the second less known example. The first one, X, has feature A. That's all we know about the matter. Therefore, probably the second example, Y, will also have feature A. So most things that are true of the first casino also seem to be true of the second casino. The first casino had the feature an all-you-can-eat buffet. That's all we know. Therefore, the second casino probably has an all-you-can-eat buffet. In case you don't know about casino culture, one of the classic Vegas things is a fancy all-you-can-eat buffet in the better casinos. This originally was something that they had at a lower than market price, and the idea was get people in the casino for the fancy buffet, and then they'll stay for the gambling, and we'll get all their money. All right, now there are some difficulties, some problems with analogical syllogism. And here's the big one. Analogical syllogism it's basically a statistical syllogism with a sample size of 1. That's basically what this is. So if I gave this to you as a statistical syllogism, you would immediately mark too small of a sample size. So by definition, analogical arguments are not ideal to work from. But sometimes it's the best we can do. Sometimes that's what we have to work with. So that's one thing. The other thing is this. The second bullet point is how do you know how do you know when two things are really similar in the genuinely relevant way? So how do you identify relevant similarities while ruling out irrelevant similarities? And how do you distinguish between relevant differences that make the two things different and destroy the analogy, and irrelevant differences that don't? So for example, let's say some disgruntled student comes to me and says, Silverman, I've decided you're like Hitler. I'm like, Hitler? Whoa. But what's that based on? Well, you both have white skin, and you both have a mustache, and you both have books on Amazon, and you both have some Semitic heritage, and like, wow, those are lots of similarities, aren't they? Now, of course, when we say someone is like Hitler, we're not saying they're both white men with mustaches, right? What we really mean, those are irrelevant similarities that don't make things analogous. Now, if I start talking about conquering the Sudetenland or the master race, something like that, that would actually make me relevantly like Hitler in the way that people usually mean. So in that same spirit, if we're back with that casino analogy, let's say I am in the second casino and I realize that there actually are some differences between casino 1 and casino 2. And I start to wonder whether or not things are, I can really expect there to be an all-you-can-eat buffet in the second casino. So some of the differences will be trivial, and some of the similarities could be trivial. And what's important is to identify the relevant similarities and the relevant differences. So trivial differences. Let's say Casino 1 has a name with a different first letter, and Casino 1 had a name with a different second letter. So today I am at the Flamingo, but yesterday I was at Caesar's Palace. There's like 2 different letters at the beginning of that name. So they're completely different, right? Of course, that's not really an important difference. Or Casino 1 had quarter slot machines by the front entrance, and the one I'm in today has dollar slot machines by the front entrance. That's probably not going to be a strong indicator of whether or not they'll be similar in the relevant way that allows me to predict whether they will have an all-you-can-eat buffet, which of course is the best feature of any respectable casino. So those are irrelevant, trivial differences, which do not make things really similar or different. But there are also important differences that break the analogy or weaken the analogy. So let's say the casino I was in yesterday was huge, and the casino I'm in today is small. Or that the casino I was in yesterday had a bar, and the casino I'm in today doesn't even have a bar. Well, here's a hint. If the casino I'm in today isn't even big enough to have a bar, it probably doesn't have an all-you-can-eat buffet that requires a lot more space and a much bigger kitchen and things like that. I mean, heck, even Dave & Buster's has a bar. And of course, the really disturbing one, Casino 1 had a giant sign advertising its all-you-can-eat buffet, but Casino 2 does not. All sorts of significant things. So how do we defeat an argument by analogy? Well, generally, you want to identify as many relevant differences as possible in order to claim that the second thing is really not analogous to the first. So again, you want to find as many different, if you're trying to defeat an argument by analogy, you want to find as many differences as possible and try to argue that those are important, meaningful, relevant differences. All right, so is argument by analogy ever useful? Well, there's at least one really, really important argument in philosophy that is based on argument by analogy. So here's one of the most disturbing things that we've concluded. It's very easy to prove your own existence and your own existence as a person, but it's actually very difficult to prove that other humans around you are actually persons. By person, I mean that they are entities that have a genuine internal life marked by rationality, emotions, thoughts, feelings, those things. So how do you know the difference between a actual person and just a good-looking robot, or what we might call a metaphysical zombie, that something that resembles a human externally, but internally doesn't have all those traditional marks of personhood? Now, proving your own existence as a person is pretty easy. Let me prove it, and you can prove your own personhood right now. I think, therefore I am. Thank you, Rene Descartes. But this only works for me, or only works for you yourself. It doesn't give other people evidence that you actually exist as a person. So look suspiciously at the person near you. Yes?
So if two people like prove that they themselves exist, if they like meet each other, can they say like since we both prove we exist, like we know each other exist?
You see, that's why it doesn't work. Because let's say I meet you. Now I can tell you I have thoughts, but did you experience my thoughts? No. You see, the I think, only I have the evidence that I think. You have the only evidence you have is Silverman said he thinks, but how do I really know? He's one of them good-looking robots, real fancy model, real advanced model. But yeah, it is. I won't be fooled. So the only argument we have for the existence of other people as persons, and not just as entities that look human and look like persons, is an argument from analogy. So premise one, other humans seem like me in many ways. They have hair, they have eyes, they have hands, they have fingers, toes. They speak, they make physical gestures and motions that are similar to mine when I experience emotions. So they smile. When I smile, it means I'm happy. When they smile, it maybe means they're happy. When I'm sad, I frown, or maybe I even cry. When they're sad, I see them frown sometimes. I see them cry sometimes. Maybe it means there's an internal phenomenon similar to the ones that I have. So there's lots of things that we have in common. And I have a rich internal life marked by emotions, pain, pleasure, subjective values, goals, thoughts, etc. Pretty good chance, conclusion, since we have so many things that we know in common, the internal things that I'm not so sure about seem at least most like pretty good chance the people around us are actually people and not just zombies or good-looking robots. Most pretty good chance they also have a similarly rich internal life. But yeah, you can't actually prove the existence of other people as people unless you have some sort of like science fiction ability where you can read other people's thoughts or experience other people's emotions or something like that. So yeah, sometimes the best you can do is an argument by analogy. All right, let's get some practice. Now again, the IT department still has not installed software on here, so we'll just talk these through, but here are the homework problems. Let's say you're familiar with the logic book for this class, but no others. And your friend is taking logic, but using another book. So you think to yourself, my book discusses analogical reasoning, so I bet my friend's book also has a section on analogical reasoning. Which of the following pieces of information would strengthen or weaken the argument? And when we say strengthen, it means it makes the analogy better and the similarity more likely, in this case, more likely that it has a section on analogical reasoning. And what makes it less likely that it has a section on analogical reasoning and weakens the argument? So what do you think about this one? Your friend's logic book is of a different color. Does that make it more likely that it has a section on analogical reasoning and strengthen the analogy? Does it weaken it? Does it have no effect? What do we think? What do you think?
Weaker.
How so?
Well, the general idea is that the book that we have is a certain color, and this is another color, then it's unlikely that it's the same book.
Okay, well, Not, I mean, we stipulated that it wasn't the same book. So we're just like, is it analogous? So I'm gonna suggest maybe we don't judge a book by its cover. What other responses do people have? Does this have an effect? Does it make it more likely, less likely? I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's gonna have no effect. Here's one of the reasons. This also is a logic book, and this is almost the exact logic book you have. But guess what? It has a different color. And there's no correlation between the color of the cover and whether or not it will have a section on analogical reasoning. I was going to say that has no effect. I mean, you know, sure, it means it's probably a different book. But we already knew that. How about this? Your friend's book, like yours, has sections on syllogism, propositional logic, quantification logic, and meaning and definition. Does this strengthen the analogy, make it more likely that it will have a section on analogical reasoning? Does it weaken it, make it less likely, or no effect? Good. This shows that for several chapters, it's matching 1-to-1. The content, and you know, logic books, I mean, there shouldn't be that much variety. There should be, there's not. Logic is like, it's like calculus. I mean, there's not that much variety in what one can plausibly include as content. So the more similarities, the better, and that strengthens the analogy. Oh, what if your friend's course is being taught by a member of the math department rather than the philosophy department? Does that strengthen the analogy, make it more likely that analogical reasoning will be in there? Does it weaken it? No difference. What do you think? Oh, good, yeah. I mean, the idea is this: different disciplines, maybe what's important to them is going to be different. And math department, they're going to focus on what? Math. Is there math in analogical reasoning? Not really. I mean, then I got real excited about the statistical reasoning. The analogy doesn't seem like a mathematical thing.
So we're taking mathematics as basic definition.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I know there's a lot that gets lumped in under math, but I think what's relevant here is that math and philosophy as disciplines, there's a reason we're not in the same department. I mean, if you go back 2,500 years, it's true, all the ancient philosophers were also mathematicians. If you ever visit me in my office, I will show you my bust of Pythagoras, because the ancient mathematicians were also philosophers. But yeah, this weakens the analogy. What if Sarah's section on syllogisms, Sarah's chapter on your friend Sarah's chapter, her book on syllogisms, doesn't use the star test? Does that strengthen the analogy, make it more likely she's going to have a section on analogical reasoning, weaken it, or no effect? Yeah, so a lot of people will think it weakens it, but there's a subtle, I think you're correct. There's a subtle reason why it doesn't really weaken it. Anyone know where the star test comes from? Yeah, the star test is Gensler's own innovation. So all it means is if your friend's book doesn't have a star test, it just means she's using a book not written by Gensler. So it's not something that you would really expect to be in absolutely every textbook. So that's not an important, that's a not relevant dissimilarity. So yeah, I mean, it's a good example. Sometimes it's hard to know, unless you have a lot of information, sometimes it's hard to know which similarities are really relevant and which ones aren't. And that's one that some people are surprised to realize isn't really a relevant similarity or dissimilarity. What if Sarah's book, your friend's book, is abstract and has few real-life examples? Does that strengthen the analogy, weaken the analogy, or have no effect? Good, how so?
His analytical reasoning is usually like more concerned like real life things and you using a lot of examples.
Good, good. So this is concerned with a lot of real life things, and all the examples I gave you weren't these really abstract things. There are things like two casinos, or comparing two movies, or comparing two logic books. And the Gensler book, Gensler likes to think he uses lots of real life examples. So yeah, that would be a difference that would weaken the probability, lower the probability. What if your friend's book isn't published by Routledge Press? Publishers of fine logic books. Does that strengthen, weaken, or have no effect on whether or not you'd expect the book to have an analogy section?
We think it's considered by what content is published in the book.
I mean, I would say it could if it's not a high quality press. That, on the other hand, I would think any high quality press would be pretty sort of equally likely to have a section on analogy. It's not like Routledge invented analogical reasoning, but yeah. So I'd say weakens if it's a really bad press, but no effect if it's at least a minimally competent press. All right, what if your friend's book is entirely on informal logic? Informal logic is what we studied for exam 2. What do you think? Strengthen, weaken, or all things? Yes. Good, yeah. It weakens it because a lot of this book is formal logic, and it shows that it's not mirroring the contents of this book. What if your friend's book has cartoons? I wish our book had cartoons. Say that again? Probably not any effect. I mean, hopefully, cartoons just seem to be one out of many ways to communicate. So yeah, that shouldn't change what it's trying to communicate. Yeah, hopefully not. What if your friend's book has a massive 100 pages on inductive reasoning? Does that strengthen the probability, weaken the probability, or have no effect? Good. So this is the area where analogical reasoning should appear, and your book only has 30 or 40. So if it has 100, that's a lot more space. It'd be very surprising if that much, and not have it cover analogical reasoning. What if your friend's book only has 10 pages on inductive logic? Strengthen, weaken, or have no effect on our expectation that it would have a section on analogical reasoning.
Kind of depends on how those 10 pages are structured, but I think it kind of like
Yeah, I mean, again, just as 100 pages makes it more likely because there's a lot more space where it could appear, having only 10 pages means there's fewer stuff it can cover, so it makes it less likely. All right, a few more. Let's say we've moved on from logic, and now we're talking about ethics. Let's say your friend at another school took an ethics course, and it discussed a viewpoint called utilitarianism, which is one of the major 3 secular, ethical, philosophical viewpoints on ethics. And you're going to take an ethics course yourself next semester, and you think to yourself, well, hey, my friend's course discussed utilitarianism, and so my course likely will too. Which of these pieces of information would strengthen or weaken your analogical argument? What if your friend's teacher will be teaching your course as well? Does that strengthen the argument that it will be covered, weaken it, or have no effect? Yeah, and generally, the professor usually gets some say at what's covered, and if he thought it was important enough to include in one course on ethics at one school, pretty good chance he thinks it's
important enough to be covered in their course at a second school. What if your friend's course was in medical ethics, but your course is in general ethical theory? Does that strengthen, weaken, or have no effect on our expectation on the quality of the education? Good, how so? Yeah, they're two different courses, and what you're going to include in the course is going to be different. In medical ethics, you're going to have a lot of case studies, you're going to have a lot of real specific issues. General ethical theory is going to be more theory-oriented, so the courses really aren't the same. I mean, I definitely hope that both would include some, but yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know, not possibly, but area kind of bigger, thing how like we're gonna take this great and see what it is. This little medical book, but we actually, the general ethics book.
Yeah. I mean, that's a worthwhile point. I mean, I'll be honest, there's an ambiguity in the way Gensler set up these questions, because the way he asked the question doesn't make it more likely, but does it strengthen the analogy? So I would say it kind of weakens the analogy, but I definitely think, yeah, it does. There is definitely an argument to be made that it should make it more likely. What if both courses use the exact same textbook? Does that strengthen, weaken, or have no effect on our expectations? Sure. I mean, almost always, the content of the class is somewhere in one of the textbooks. If you're using the same textbook, pretty good chance you're going to cover the same material. What if your friend's teacher has a good reputation, but yours doesn't? How does that affect our reasoning? Yeah, I mean, part of the question is whether the individual professor is choosing the content or whether the department is. So you're right. I mean, if it's just the quality of the delivery that's affected, then it has no effect. But if some schools let the professors choose their own content, then I would say it would be. I know of one school where their intro to philosophy course, they had this really mediocre adjunct, and they found out that he was teaching dream analysis, dream journalism, and the Myers-Briggs test as part of philosophy. Now, I like dream analysis, and I think Myers-Briggs is very clever, but I am fairly certain that neither of those are part of traditional philosophy, traditionally understood. So yeah, when you got a teacher with a bad rep, you might not know what's going to happen. What if your teacher is a Marxist while your friend's is not? Here to teach all you capitalist swine the errors of your ways. Does that strengthen the analogy, weaken it, or have no effect?
It could weaken it, but again, I go back to the question of whether the departments in the content or the professor is.
Good. Yeah, I mean, if the professor's choosing the content, then the professor might think some things are more important than others because of their ideology. Hopefully, any good teacher is going to cover all the major schools, but not always the case. All right, enough of that. All right, any questions about reasoning by analogy? All right, let me move on and let's go to exam 2 and let's go over the problems. No, that's not right. All right, first thing we'll note, there are 104 possible points
on this test. Basically, I put an extra credit question in, so you could get 104% out of 100. My attempt to make the course a little easier. Let's go over some definitions. Which term refers to the view that if there's no way to test a statement, then that statement is meaningless? That was logical positivism. You'll remember those exercises we did on meaning. Which term refers to claims that are internally incoherent? That, of course, is self-contradictory terms, terms that the claim cannot be true because the terms are incoherent. Which term refers to the view that if the truth of a claim could make no practical difference, then that claim is meaningless? That is pragmatism. Yeah, I'll release the answers to you later, so that you can look it over. Which fallacy attempts to disprove a belief based on how that belief came to be held? That is the genetic fallacy. Genetic fallacy is where you've changed the topic. You are no longer talking about whether or not the belief in question is true. Instead, I'm telling a story about how you've come to hold that belief, and that has really no effect on whether or not the belief is true. Which fallacy attempts to come to a conclusion on a matter based on the fact that the data is ambiguous? That is the appeal to ignorance. Ignorance is when it's an issue has not been resolved conclusively, and then I reason from that my view must be correct. So it's sort of like none of this information exonerates you, therefore you must be guilty. We've gone from, we don't know to you must be guilty. A triangle has three angles. This is an a priori claim. A priori means knowable apart from physical empirical experience. All you need to know is the definition of a triangle. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit on that C plane. That is an a posteriori claim. To justify it, to prove it, you need to go and boil water on that plane. It's not something you can know apart from experience. In Philosophy 205, earning an A requires a 93 average in the class. That is an a priori justified truth. How do you know it? You don't look out at the world, you read the syllabus and see how I've defined an A there. Water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius at sea level. That is an a priori truth, because the way we define the Celsius scale is based on the freezing and boiling point of water at sea level. A priori. Anything that is red is colored is an a priori truth. If you understand the definition of red, in part entails being the color red, you will actually read this as anything that is the color red is colored, and that is true by definition. A priori. Analytic, synthetic, and self-contradictory. There are 5-foot-long blue ants in the hallway. This is a synthetic claim. It's not true by definition. It is not self-contradictory based on the words. It could be true, but of course we'll go out into the hallway, and it almost certainly is not. All bachelors are messy. This is a synthetic claim. There's nothing about bachelors that are defined as being messy. There's nothing self-contradictory about the idea of a bachelor being messy. In contrast, if I said some bachelors are married, that would be self-contradictory. All frogs are either green or some other color. This is an analytic truth. Not based on anything about frogs, but on the way the words all, either, or, all noun either has some trait or not some trait. That is an analytic truth based on the way the discluded middle works. Some triangles have four sides, self-contradictory, as you almost certainly know. If I claim to have a four-sided triangle, you don't have to see it to know that I'm lying or I'm wrong. If all Martians are Virginians and if all Virginians are Canadians, then all Martians are Canadian. This is an analytic truth because of the use of the word if. Basically, we're just saying we're defining relations. And if these relations hold, then this pattern will always be true. If we define Martians as Virginians and define Virginians as Canadians, then it would be true that Martians are Canadians. Fallacies. You only seem like an idiot. This, of course, is a trick question. Don't say yes. Also, don't say no. No one has disproven the existence of pixies, therefore they must exist. This, again, is the appeal to ignorance. We move from we don't know whether or not pixies exist to they must exist. My preferred view. LeBron James says Hoosiers is the best movie ever. LeBron James, famous basketball player, is not really an appropriate authority on movies. By the way, in case you missed the joke, anyone know what Hoosiers is about? It's a movie about basketball. Most people vote for the MTV party, and so should you. That is standard appeal to the crowd thinking. We should reject my opponent's health care plan because it will burn senior citizens' homes to the ground. This is almost certainly a straw man fallacy. There's no content in a health care plan that would burn somebody's home to the ground. This is what happens when you are misconstruing the content of the plan. You should try smoking, since you'll enjoy it, lose weight, and get more breaks at work. This, of course, is the pro-con fallacy. If true, these things would indeed be pros, but we're leaving something important out. We're leaving out, and you might die 20 years too early due to painful lung cancer. So that is the pro-con fallacy. Lower-class Americans are uneducated and immoral, therefore their political views must be wrong. This is the standard ad hominem fallacy. We've shifted. We're not really talking about giving evidence for or against any political views. Instead, we're just insulting, either correctly or incorrectly, a group of people and not really discussing the truth or false of these political views. From The Godfather, you should agree to our terms. Either your name will be on the contract or your brains will be on the contract. That is a standard appeal to force. It's a threat. It's not actually an attempt to give a justification. These 3-year-long magazine subscriptions are only $3 a week, so the magazine subscriptions must be very inexpensive. Well, if you actually do the math, 3 times 52 times 3 is over $450. That actually is a lot of money to spend on magazines. And therefore, that is the composition part whole fallacy. The fascists want to make the school year longer, so we should make it shorter instead. That is the opposition fallacy. Group wants to do something, we hate the group, therefore we want to do the opposite of whatever they say. Crime goes up whenever ice cream sales go up, therefore we need better regulation of ice cream. This, of course, is the false cause post hoc fallacy. Shockingly, ice cream does not actually cause more violent crime. From Rene Descartes, my summary. I know that my mind works well and that I'm not crazy. I've thought about it a lot, and I'm confident that the logic of my argument is airtight. So the conclusion is that my mind works well. My evidence is I'm confident that my mind is working well, which is a circular argument. Professor Silverman grew up in New Jersey, so he must be very cynical, have a strong New Jersey accent, and look like one of the characters from Jersey Shore. That, of course, is a stereotype. You don't really love Sarah, you just think you do because you were lonely when you met her, so you should try dating other people instead of marrying her. Well, this again is the genetic fallacy. Instead of saying the pros and cons about Sarah and marriage to her, we're discussing how you might have come to a belief. The letters of recommendation say you'll be very lucky to get this candidate to work for you, so we should hire him and be confident that he'll do a lot of high-quality work. That, of course, is the ambiguity fallacy. You can read this statement to either be, they're a great candidate and will work very hard, or this candidate is very lazy, and you'll be lucky if they ever work for you. Tone, a backwards country. Of course, when we call something backwards, that's negative. Freedom fighter. Of course, we love freedom in our culture. Therefore, that is a positive way of describing someone. 70-year-old person. Well, if somebody is in fact 70, that is a fairly neutral way to describe them. If you don't like them, you can call them an old geezer. If you do like them, maybe you call them a senior citizen or something like that. Flawed definitions. College students mean college sophomores. Sophomores is a narrower group than students. Obviously, there's lots of students who are not sophomores. Atonement means that which serves to atone. That, of course, is circular. If you don't know what atonement is, you don't know what it means to serve to atone. Bachelor means bastard who stays single. Obviously, we have a tonal shift here. We move from a neutral tone to a very negative tone. And finally, quarterbacks means football players. Football players is a broader category than quarterbacks, which is the narrower category. So football players is too broad to define that term. And there we have it. I was generally pleased with people's performance. Again, I'll give you the reminder warning. Don't get cocky. Grades on the next two exams tend to correlate much more closely with exam one rather than exam two, because they test skills that are much more like exam one. On that note, I hope to see you all on Wednesday. Stay warm, stay safe. Don't catch COVID over the spring break. Thank you very much. I could really use this break. Thank you. Hey, how's it going?
I have a question about when the question number exam.
Sure.
So the one about what was it? The one that was talking about like you only love Sarah because you were lonely.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I thought personally that was more of a appeal to emotion because the vocabulary was kind of targeting aspects of emotion in the sense of like you saying, oh, you're very lonely, you don't necessarily like lover and all that. I don't know. So I'm not sure if that's like a valid thought process.
Well, you're correct if they were talking about her emotions or his emotions. That being said, appeal to emotion doesn't actually mean you're talking about emotions. It means you're using emotionally laden words. So it's if you were to use overly negative or overly positive words instead of neutral words to try to manipulate people instead of an actual argument. So if I say we should reject this bill because it is stupid and shocking, you know, I haven't actually said anything about the bill. All I did was use emotionally laden words. Now, the thing with Sarah, they actually, you know, I mean, those are actually things that might be true of somebody's thought process, but that's not what we mean by the appeal to emotion.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. It's about emotion, but that's not what that fallacy means.
Okay. All right. I think I understand.
Cool.
Actually, the same thing.
And I just made all the answers available, so you can look back through your test now.
Okay. And if I have any other questions,
Yeah, you can talk to me before or after class, or if there's a bunch of them, we can have a video call or something.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so this question, I said that was made from territory knowledge,
Hmm.
because it seems to me that
Yeah.
order to get that information?
Well, I mean, that's not what we usually mean by a posteriori. So in the same way for a triangle, you might have to look it up in a dictionary. But that's not what we mean by a posteriori. Reviewing a definition, yeah.
So would you be able to gather from, like, well, I guess it's not posteriori, but like, personally. Okay. So then just all reading count as, would not